What happens when a lonely nurse with a broken past saves a stranger in the rain, only to find herself pulled into a fake engagement with a billionaire haunted by his mother's dying wish? Natalie never imagined a simple act of kindness would lead to betrayal, redemption, and the kind of love she thought she'd never find. But nothing about Ryan Bennett is what he seems. And neither is their deal. This is a story of second chances, heart-stopping twists, and love worth fighting for. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and don't forget to subscribe to hear the full story. The rain fell hard in Portland that night, a steady torrent that blurred the streetlights and turned the sidewalks into rivers. The city pulsed beneath the storm. Neon flickers, distant sirens, the occasional honk of a horn muffled by water. Natalie Quinn pulled her thin jacket tighter around her as she walked home from the night shift at St. Mercy Hospital. Her sneakers squished with every step, soaked through, and her dark hair clung to her cheeks, plastered by the relentless downpour. But she barely noticed the cold. Her mind was elsewhere, running through the list of patients she'd seen that night, the sounds of heart monitors, shallow breaths, the silence that followed. She took a sharp breath, the kind meant to hold back something heavier. Years had passed, but the weight of her mother's death never lifted. Pneumonia misdiagnosed. No insurance. A crowded hospital waiting room. A nurse too late. Natalie had been in nursing school then, still full of hope. Still foolish enough to believe the system worked. That hope had crumbled the day her mother died, and the man she thought she loved walked out months later, saying he couldn't handle the version of her that grief left behind. Now, she lived for others, not herself. Not love, just the next patient. As she reached a quieter street, she tucked her chin into her collar and prepared to cross. The rain pelted harder. That was when it happened. A screech of tires. Her body froze, instincts kicking in before her brain caught up. She turned just in time to see headlights fishtailing across the slick asphalt. A black sedan skidded out of control, its wheels turning frantically before the car slammed headfirst into a lamppost. The metal groaned and bent. The windshield spider, webbed on impact. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. For one split second, everything went still. Then Natalie ran. She sprinted across the street, puddles splashing around her ankles, her heart pounding. The driver's side door was ajar, swaying in the wind. The man inside was slumped forward, his face against the steering wheel. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. His chest moved, barely. "Natalie, don't freeze," she whispered to herself, voice tight. "Move." She dropped to her knees beside him, one hand bracing against the frame of the car, the other reaching for his neck. A pulse, weak, thready. His skin was clammy. She looked down. His white shirt was soaked in blood and rain, and he wasn't responding. "Hey," she said, louder now, her hands moving fast, checking for injuries. "Stay with me." She tore the shirt open at the chest, revealing deep bruises already blooming across his ribs. Her hands moved automatically, compressing, checking breathing, improvising. She took off her jacket, bundled it, and pressed it against his chest to slow the bleeding. "Don't die on me," she muttered. "Not tonight. I've lost enough already." Her fingers fumbled for her phone, slick with water, nearly dropping it before she managed to dial. 911, she said when the operator answered, her voice rapid and calm despite the storm, despite the blood on her hands. "Car accident, one victim, male, unconscious, chest trauma, off Hawthorne and 9th. Please, hurry." The man groaned softly, his eyelids fluttering. His eyes, when they opened, were brown, dark, unfocused. They locked with hers for a moment, dazed and searching. "Angel," he whispered, barely audible. "Thank you." Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. "No," she said sharply, adjusting the pressure on his chest. "Hey, Stay with me. You're not dying. Do you hear me? The sound of sirens cut through the rain, growing louder, closer. Red and blue lights flashed against the wet pavement as an ambulance rounded the corner. Paramedics spilled out, rushing toward her. Natalie stepped back, trembling, soaked to the bone. One of the paramedics nodded at her with quick gratitude before turning his attention to the man. He's got a pulse. Another called oxygen, stretcher, load. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Natalie stood there, staring after it, breathless. She didn't know his name. She didn't know if he would live. All she knew was that for the first time in a long while, she hadn't been too late. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor echoed in the sterile hospital room. Ryan Bennett opened his eyes slowly, wincing at the blinding fluorescent lights above. Pain radiated from his ribs with every breath, and his head throbbed like a war drum. He blinked a few times, disoriented, his surroundings fuzzy. Tubes, wires, and the steady hum of machines told him one thing. He was lucky to be alive. Sitting beside him was Lisa, his assistant, tapping away on a tablet. She looked up, startled, when he stirred. Relief washed over her face instantly. "You're awake," she breathed, setting the tablet down. "God, Ryan, you scared the hell out of us." He cleared his throat, voice raspy. "What happened?" Lisa stood, pouring him a glass of water. "You were in an accident. Swerved off the road, hit a lamppost. You got a concussion, a few broken ribs, bruising, nothing permanent, but you were unconscious for a while." He took a small sip and leaned back against the pillows, his brow furrowed. "I remember." "You're lucky," she said. "They said if that woman hadn't found you when she did," her voice trailed off. "What woman?" Lisa shrugged. "Nobody knows. She called 911, kept you stable, then disappeared, didn't leave her name. The paramedics tried to find her, but..." Ryan's heartbeat quickened. A blurry image began to form in his mind. Rain falling like a curtain, a pair of steady hands on his chest, a soft voice urging him to stay awake, and eyes, dark, focused, full of something he couldn't name. "She was real," he murmured. Lisa gave him a curious look. "You remember her?" He nodded slowly. "I called her Angel, I think." Lisa arched a brow. "You were delirious, but okay, if you say so." "I need to find her," Ryan said, his voice gaining strength. "She saved my life." Lisa tilted her head. "And you want to thank her?" "More than that," he muttered, almost to himself. "I need to see her again." She didn't question it. Working for Ryan Bennett meant accepting that he often acted on instinct, and that instinct was rarely wrong. "I'll pull hospital surveillance, cross-check, 911 call logs, anything I can find." As Lisa left the room, Ryan stared at the ceiling, the image of her face seared into his mind. He couldn't explain it, but her presence lingered, like a thread tugging gently at his chest. Across town, Natalie tried to bury the night in the chaos of a new shift. She moved through the air like a shadow, tending to patients with practiced precision. Vitals, dressings, gentle words, but her thoughts kept drifting. She tried to tell herself he was just another stranger, a man she'd helped, nothing more, but it didn't feel that simple. Something about him had stuck, the way his eyes had locked on hers, the broken thank you barely whimpered through blood and rain. It haunted her in quiet moments. She was changing a dressing on a boy's fractured arm when a nurse tapped her shoulder. "Hey, someone dropped this off for you?" Natalie glanced at the folded paper in the nurse's hand, frowning. No return name. She opened it cautiously. The handwriting was sharp but elegant. Thank you for saving me. Meet me at the Sky Room, 6 p.m. tonight. A single white rose was tucked inside, the petals cool and damp. Natalie stared at the note, her heart thudding in her chest. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but somehow she already knew who it was from. She finished her shift in a daze, the words looping in her mind. At home, the rose sat in a glass on her kitchen counter, its presence both comforting and unsettling. The Sky Room was upscale, far removed from her usual world of worn-out sneakers and vending machine dinners. She barely owned anything that could pass as formal. After debating for far too long, she pulled out a black dress. Simple, a little faded, but the best she had. It hadn't seen the light of day since a failed anniversary dinner years ago. She smoothed the wrinkles, pulled her hair back, and slipped into her coat, her heart fluttering in a way she hadn't felt in years. The bus ride to the Sky Room was quiet. Rain misted against the windows as the city rushed by in streaks of light. Natalie didn't know what to expect. All she knew was that someone had gone to great lengths to find her. All she knew was that someone had gone to great lengths to find her. And tonight, she'd learn why. The Sky Room shimmered like a glass crown perched above Portland's skyline. Natalie stepped through its doors just before 6, her dress clinging slightly from the damp air. The hostess greeted her with a knowing smile, as if she had been expected. "Are you Miss Quinn?" she asked. Natalie nodded, clutching the note in her pocket. "Right this way," the hostess said, leading her through a maze of white linen tablecloths and soft jazz melodies. At a corner table near the floor-to-ceiling windows, he stood. It was him. The man from the crash, cleaned up and standing tall in a tailored navy suit that hugged his broad shoulders. A faint bruise still shadowed his jawline, but it only made him look more real, alive. Natalie stopped mid-step, startled by the contrast. He looked so different from the bloodied, broken figure she'd pulled from the wreck. But when their eyes met, recognition sparked immediately. "You're her," he said, voice low and certain. She nodded, hesitating. "I'm glad you're okay. I didn't expect this." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please sit. I'm Ryan Bennett." She sat slowly, folding her hands in her lap. Her nerves buzzed under her skin. "Why am I here, Ryan?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, voice calm but charged with something deeper. "First, I need to thank you. The doctors told me. If you hadn't found me when you did, I wouldn't have made it, so thank you, truly." Natalie looked down, uncomfortable. "I was just in the right place." "Anyone would have helped." He shook his head. "No, not anyone. You." She blinked, thrown by the conviction in his voice. "I run Bennett Innovations," he continued. "My father built it. My mother gave it a soul. She was a philanthropist. Her biggest dream was to create a hospital for those who couldn't afford care. She died before it could happen, but she left me something." His voice softened. "She left me a condition. I have until my 32nd birthday, 3 months from now, to marry a good woman. Someone kind. Someone worthy of continuing her dream. If I don't, the fund she set aside for the hospital, millions, goes to another foundation, one that has no intention of building anything." Natalie stared, unsure if she was hearing him right. "Let me get this straight. So you can keep the fund?" "Not a real marriage," Ryan said quickly. "Just on paper, 3 months, appearances, events. Nothing more. You pretend to be my fiancé. Help me secure the fund. And in return, I'll give you whatever you want." Her heart thudded in her chest. "Whatever I want?" He nodded. "Name it." She studied him, suspicious. "Why me? You don't know anything about me." "I know you knelt in the middle of a storm to save a stranger," he said, his voice quieter now. "I know you stayed until help came and then vanished without asking for thanks. My mother believed that kind of selflessness was rare. I think she was right." She looked away, out the window at the glittering city lights. "I'm not rare," she murmured. "I'm tired. I'm just trying to get through the day." Ryan didn't press her. He waited, letting her thoughts unfold. "What's the fund for exactly?" she asked finally, turning back to him. "A hospital," he said. "For people like my mom. People who fall through the cracks." Natalie's throat tightened. Her mother's face flickered in her mind, gaunt, coughing, waiting in an overcrowded ward. The bitterness she carried every day suddenly felt heavier. She looked back at him. "If I say yes, I want a clinic. My own. Free care. No bills." My mother dreamed of that place. Ryan nodded without hesitation. "Done. I'll fund it. Start to finish. By the time this is over, it'll be yours." She stared at him. It was insane, ridiculous. And yet, 3 months, she said slowly. "That's all." He nodded. 3 months. No strings. She leaned back, still unsure. "Don't expect me to fall for you." He smiled for the first time, a flicker of amusement dancing in his eyes. "Fair enough." "It's a deal." He extended his hand across the table. Natalie took it, her grip firm, heart unsteady. As they shook, a waiter arrived with menus, and the illusion began. The next morning, Natalie stood outside her modest apartment building with a small suitcase at her feet. Her hands were stuffed into the pockets of her coat, fingers curling and uncurling with nerves. A sleek, black car pulled up to the curb with quiet precision. The back door opened, and Ryan stepped out, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. His movements were careful. He still favored his left side, likely from the fractured ribs. But his presence was unshaken. "Ready?" he asked, voice calm, unreadable. "Not even a little," Natalie muttered, but she nodded. He lifted her bag without a word and tucked it into the trunk. She slid into the passenger seat, the leather interior cool against her back. As the city blurred past the windows, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't exactly tense, but it wasn't easy either. Natalie stared out at the drizzle-covered streets, her mind still trying to comprehend what she'd just agreed to. 3 months. A fake engagement. A stranger she'd pulled from a wreck, now pulling her into a different kind of collision. One with his world. When they turned onto a winding driveway that led up a hill, Natalie's breath caught. The house, or rather mansion, came into view like something out of a movie. All glass, stone, and sweeping views of the city below. Modern, intimidating, impossibly clean. "This is where you live?" she asked, eyes wide despite herself. Ryan shrugged. "It's just a house." To him, maybe, but to her, it was another world entirely. Inside, the house opened up to a vast foyer with marble floors and a grand staircase that curved upward like it belonged to royalty. Natalie followed Ryan through the main hall, trying not to let her awe show. She passed art she couldn't name. Vases probably worth more than her car, if she had one. "Your room's upstairs," Ryan said, pointing. "Second door on the right. Bathroom's attached. Make yourself at home." She climbed the staircase and entered the guest room, her feet hesitating on the plush carpet. The room was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-size bed, High ceilings, a wall of bookshelves, and a view of the skyline that made her blink. She unpacked slowly, carefully folding her simple clothes into drawers that smelled like cedar. It all felt temporary, like she was trespassing in someone else's life. Downstairs, Ryan met with Lisa in the study, a stack of folders between them. "First event is tomorrow," Lisa said, scanning her tablet. "Charity gala. You'll need to introduce her as your fiancé." Ryan rubbed his temples. "She'll be fine. She's tougher than she looks." That evening, Natalie stood in front of the mirror in the room she still didn't feel like she belonged in. Ryan had sent up an emerald green dress earlier, and when she slipped it on, it fit like it had been made for her. The silk hugged her curves, the neckline tasteful but flattering. She'd pinned her curls back, swiped on a bit of mascara, and now stared at herself like she didn't quite recognize the woman looking back. A knock at the door. She mumbled, "Come in," and Ryan stepped in, freezing when he saw her. "You look." He paused, eyes flicking over her. "Good." She smoothed the fabric self-consciously. "It's not really me, but it'll do." He walked forward and handed her a small velvet box. One more thing. Inside was a silver ring with a single, glinting diamond. Simple. Elegant. "For the act," he said. She slid it onto her finger. The weight felt heavier than it looked. At the gala, the ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and clinking champagne glasses. Ryan kept his hand gently on her back as they worked the room. "This is Natalie Quinn," he said smoothly. "My fiancée. She's the reason I'm here tonight." Natalie smiled on cue, nodded at strangers who studied her with polite curiosity. "How'd you two meet?" someone asked. "In the rain," Natalie said simply. "He needed help, and I was there." It was true, or close enough. Later, they stood on the balcony as the city glowed beneath the stars. Natalie leaned on the railing, the wind tugging at her dress. "I don't like lying," she said. "Neither do I," Ryan replied, loosening his tie. "But some things are worth it." She didn't respond. She just stared at the skyline and reminded herself. This was a deal. A means to an end. Nothing more. The gala faded behind them like a half-remembered dream. Natalie had done what she came to do, played the role, smiled at the donors, nodded when introduced as Ryan's fiancée. But the second she stepped back into the mansion that night, kicked off the heels, and peeled the borrowed silk dress from her body, she felt the weight of it settle on her again. This life wasn't hers. And no matter how many times Ryan said it was just for show, it didn't feel that simple. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, fittings, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. Ryan kept his distance, professionally polite but emotionally unreadable. Natalie found herself waking earlier, wandering the halls of the mansion, like a ghost in someone else's story. It wasn't until the charity luncheon the following weekend that the spell began to crack. She was halfway through a conversation with a kind-faced woman about the free clinic project when she heard a familiar voice behind her, one she hadn't heard in nearly 2 years. "Well, look who it is." Natalie turned sharply. Her heart dropped. Kyle. Kyle. He stood in a wrinkled designer suit, a drink in one hand and bitterness in his eyes. His smirk was the same as ever, mocking, sharp-edged. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stepping slightly back. "I could ask you the same." He gave a slow, deliberate glance to the diamond on her hand. "Engaged to Ryan Bennett." "Huh? That's rich." Her jaw clenched. "What do you want, Kyle?" "I work for one of his investors now," he said with a smug grin. "Small world, huh? Or maybe not so small when you're always climbing the same ladders." You don't know anything about this. Oh, but I do. He leaned in closer, voice low. Ryan always has a plan. He doesn't do anything unless it gets him something. And you're a tool in his kit, just like the rest of us were. She stared at him, heart pounding. You're wrong. He smiled, cruel and knowing. Am I? Ask him what happens after his birthday. Ask what he does with the fund once it's in his name. You think he's building some free hospital out of the goodness of his heart. He leaned back, swirling his drink. Watch yourself, Natalie. You might be good, but he's better at playing pretend. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Her pulse was thudding too loud in her ears. She turned and walked away, not looking back, not letting him see the doubt already crawling under her skin. That night, she sat on the edge of the guest room bed, the velvet box with the engagement ring open beside her. She stared at it in silence. Everything about Ryan had felt. Reserved, yes, but not manipulative. But Kyle's words twisted in her mind, echoing in the quiet. Downstairs, Ryan was reading in his study. She stepped into the doorway, arms crossed, her voice more brittle than she meant it to be. Kyle was at the luncheon today. Ryan looked up slowly, brow tightening. I saw him. He talked to me. Ryan set the book down. And? He said you always have a plan, that once the fund is secured, you're selling it off. He stood, frustration flickering behind his eyes. He's trying to get in your head. He said I was just a tool. Her voice broke on the last word. Ryan stepped forward but stopped when he saw her recoil. Natalie, Kyle's been gunning for me since I fired him. He embezzled money from the company, nearly tanked an entire project. He's not just bitter. She shook her head. That doesn't mean he's wrong. You think I'd do all this just to trick you? I don't know what to think, she snapped. You say it's just a deal, but every day it feels more real. And that terrifies me. Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. I'm not Kyle, Ryan said finally. And I'm not my father either. I'm not using you. Natalie didn't reply. She turned and climbed the stairs, her hand trembling on the banister. She didn't see the way Ryan watched her go. Something like regret flickering in his eyes. Something that looked a lot like fear. The next morning, Natalie woke before the sun. The mansion was quiet, the kind of stillness that made her feel like she was intruding again. She pulled on a sweater and wandered downstairs, her bare feet silent against the hardwood. In the kitchen, the lights were dimmed low and the rain had returned, tapping gently against the glass walls. It felt familiar, comforting even. The only thing that didn't was the tension still clinging to her from the night before. She needed clarity. Later that day, Ryan approached her in the entryway, holding 2 travel mugs of coffee. Come with me, he said, offering one to her. His tone was softer than it had been in days. No press, no schedule, no pretense, just an invitation. Natalie hesitated, then nodded. Where? You'll see. They drove in silence, winding through the outskirts of the city until the skyline gave way to half-developed land and open lots. The road turned gravelly, and soon they pulled into a fenced property. It didn't look like much. Scaffolding, raw concrete walls, a crane towering over skeletal structures. But as Natalie stepped out of the car, she felt something shift in the air. This is the hospital, Ryan said. He led her through the construction zone, his voice low as he pointed out where everything would go. The emergency entrance, the pediatric wing, the garden in the courtyard his mother had dreamed of. Natalie trailed beside him, her boots crunching on gravel, the smell of fresh cement and wet earth filling the air. She wanted something different, Ryan said, pausing by an unfinished hallway. Not just another building with white walls and overwhelmed staff. She wanted light, color, dignity. A place people wouldn't fear walking into. Natalie reached out, brushing her fingers along a steel beam. She sounds incredible. She was, he said. Tough as nails. Grew up with nothing. Fought for everything. She made my dad swear to give back once the company started making real money. This hospital was her biggest dream. He turned toward her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. When I woke up in that wrecked car, all I could think about was how I'd failed her. Then I saw you, and for some reason, it felt like maybe I hadn't. Natalie swallowed hard, caught off guard by the rawness in his voice. You're not failing her, she said. You're doing it. This is real. He looked at her, quiet, for a beat. And your clinic? Where would it be? She hesitated, then smiled a little. Something smaller. Maybe tucked in a neighborhood people forget about. No appointments. Just walk. Inns, a nurse at the front who doesn't care about insurance cards. Just guest. Ryan nodded slowly, then turned and pointed to a smaller lot nearby, bordered by overgrown grass and broken fencing. That one's yours. I bought the land last week. We'll break ground next month. She blinked. Wait, what? I told you, this isn't just a deal anymore, Natalie. Your dream matters too. She stood frozen for a moment, her hands curling around the travel mug, something lodged in her throat, tight and aching. She hadn't expected him to follow through. Not like this. He watched her with quiet intensity. You're not just part of this plan. You're the reason it's working. She looked away, overwhelmed, but the warmth spreading through her chest was undeniable. Later that afternoon, Ryan took her to a storage unit outside the city. There's something else, he said, unlocking the door. Inside were stacks of boxes labeled Mom. Personal, dust, clung to everything. He opened one and pulled out a small silver chain, a pendant at the center engraved with one word, brave. She wore it every day, he said, handing it to her. Even when she was sick, said it reminded her of who she was. Natalie stared at the necklace, then slowly took it, letting the cool metal settle into her palm. Why give it to me? Because, he said, you remind me of her. Her chest tightened. She fastened the chain around her neck, the word resting just above her heart. It felt like a connection, not just to his mother, but to the reason she'd started all of this. They stood there in the quiet for a moment, surrounded by memory, by legacy, by something unspoken that was slowly taking shape between them. Nights at the mansion had begun to feel different. There was a rhythm now. A quiet one, but steady. Natalie would make tea before bed, sometimes bringing a mug to Ryan if he was still holed up in his study, poring over construction updates or hospital financials. They would sit together, not always talking, but never quite needing to. Silence with him no longer felt awkward. It felt shared. One night, as rain lashed the windows harder than usual, Natalie found him hunched over blueprints again, shoulders tense. She knocked softly on the frame before entering. You're still up. Ryan looked up, rubbing his temples. Couldn't sleep. The electrical layout for the pediatric wing isn't matching the new specs. If we don't fix it now, it could delay the timeline. Natalie walked in, setting a steaming cup beside his elbow. Caffeine won't help tonight. Try chamomile. He smiled faintly, grateful, and leaned back in his chair. Thanks. She sat on the couch across from him, tucking her legs underneath her. You don't have to do it all alone, you know. I'm used to it, he said simply. Well, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug, get unused to it. He looked at her, something shifting his gaze. I'm starting to. The next night, Natalie sat on her bed, the silver pendant warm against her chest. Her fingers traced the word brave over and over. She missed her mom more than usual. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was how this strange life she was living reminded her of all the things her mother had wanted for her. Security, purpose, something bigger than struggle. Tears welled unexpectedly, and before she could stop them, they spilled, silent and unrelenting. She didn't hear the knock, didn't see the door creak open until Ryan was suddenly beside her, crouching gently. "Hey," he said softly, "what's wrong?" She wiped her face quickly, ashamed. "Nothing. Just thinking about my mom." He didn't speak, didn't offer hollow comfort. Instead, he sat next to her and pulled her into a hug. No hesitation, no questions. Just warmth. Steady, grounding warmth. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. She let herself stay in that embrace longer than she meant to. The rain outside muffled everything else. The guilt, the doubt, the distance they were supposed to maintain. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was holding herself together alone. Days passed, and the boundary between performance and reality blurred further. They started having breakfast together, exchanging dry jokes over toast. At night, they sat on the patio with blankets over their shoulders, watching the lights of Portland twinkle like stars fallen from the sky. One afternoon, Ryan picked her up from her hospital shift, surprising her with a hard hat and a grin. "What's this?" she asked, squinting at him as he handed her a clipboard. "Site visit," he said. "Future Dr. Quinn." She laughed, shaking her head. "Just Nurse Quinn. But thanks for the promotion." They drove to the hospital site together, walking through the now framed walls and wired hallways. Natalie stood in the future lobby, eyes wide, imagining the lives that would pass through here. She wandered into what would become then into the atriatric wing. It was real now, tangible. It wasn't just blueprints and promises. "This is bigger than us," she said quietly. Ryan stood beside her, watching her with a softness he never showed anyone else. "And it's happening because of you." Later that evening, they shared dinner on the balcony. Nothing fancy, just takeout containers and laughter. She told him about her worst nursing school shift. He told her about the first time his mother embarrassed him at a board meeting by correcting his speech in front of 10 executives. They were stories for no one else, shared in a bubble neither of them wanted to pop. But the memory of Kyle's warning still lingered in Natalie's mind like a shadow she couldn't shake. One night, as the wind howled and the rain softened to mist, she glanced at Ryan as he read beside her on the couch, his glasses slipping down his nose. "This is still just a deal, right?" she asked suddenly. He looked up, caught off guard. His answer came slowly. "It's whatever you want it to be." Her heart thudded. That wasn't the answer she expected, and it scared her more than anything else. Because the truth, the part she hadn't admitted to herself yet, was that she didn't want it to be just a deal anymore. Natalie came home late from her hospital shift, exhaustion dragging behind her like a heavy coat. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her feet aching, and all she wanted was a hot shower and a quiet evening curled beneath a blanket. The mansion was dim when she arrived, quiet but not in an ominous way, more like a place at rest. She dropped her bag by the door, slipped off her shoes, and turned toward the kitchen. That's when she saw it. A manila envelope sat on the counter, her name printed across the front in neat block letters. No stamp, no note. Just her name, Natalie Quinn. She frowned, peeling it open with cautious fingers. Inside were documents, grainy photographs, a typed letter. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning each page. The first image showed Ryan meeting with a man in a tailored suit. Papers exchanged, hands shaking. The next few were time-stamped, each from the past week. showing them together on different days, always somewhere private, always with documents involved. Then came a string of forged emails. At least they looked real, but something about them felt off, where Ryan appeared to be arranging a post-birthday transfer of funds to a third party corporation. The letter explained it all in cold, emotionless detail. Ryan Bennett plans to sell the hospital fund once he gains full access on his birthday. Everything he's promised you is a lie. Natalie's stomach dropped. She flipped through the rest. More photos, supposed bank transfers, screenshots of conversations she had no way of verifying. Her head spun. The necklace around her neck suddenly felt too tight. Her breath caught, shallow and sharp. The front door clicked open. Ryan walked in, already loosening his tie, a hint of a smile on his face, until he saw her. "What's wrong?" he asked, stepping forward. She held up the envelope. "Explain this." He froze mid-step. His gaze dropped to the papers in her hand. He took them, flipping through with growing confusion and a deepening crease between his brows. "This isn't real," he said. "None of this is real. Someone's setting me up." "Mark said you'd do this," she snapped. "He warned me you'd use me, make me believe this was more than a game." Ryan's head snapped up. "Mark gave you this?" She nodded tightly, fists clenched. "Weeks ago. He's lying," Ryan said, voice low, strained. "I fired him 2 years ago for siphoning money from a medical research project. He's held a grudge ever since." Natalie gave a bitter laugh. "And I'm just supposed to believe you?" "I'm telling you the truth." She pointed at the photos. "Then what the hell is all this?" "I don't know, but I'll find out." "Is the clinic a lie too?" she asked, voice breaking. "The land, the plans, the promises?" "No," he said, stepping closer, his face open and desperate. "That's real. Every cent, every detail. That clinic is yours, Natalie. That's not part of some deal. It's a promise I meant to keep." But the doubt had already settled in, deep and stubborn. "I should have trusted my instincts," she whispered. "This was a mistake." She reached for her coat. The ring on her finger glinted under the kitchen light as she pulled it off. "I'm done." Ryan moved to stop her. "Please, don't go. Let me fix this. Let me prove it." But she shook her head, stepping away from him, eyes shining with fury and betrayal. "Fix it yourself," she said, voice flat. Then she walked out, slamming the door behind her. The rain greeted her like an old friend, cold and relentless. She didn't care. Let it soak her through. Let it wash away everything she'd let herself believe. She'd been foolish. She'd been foolish. She'd let her guard down for a man with the same charm and polish as the one who left her shattered before. Back inside, Ryan stood motionless in the kitchen, the forged documents scattered across the floor. He grabbed his phone, fingers shaking as he dialed. Lisa answered on the second ring. "It's Mark," he said, voice like thunder. "He's behind this. Find out what he's doing now." Lisa's voice crackled through the speaker. "I'll dig. But all of it?" He hung up without answering, staring out the window into the pouring night. He hadn't meant for this to happen. Not like this. Not with her. The storm had gathered strength, lashing against the city like it was trying to tear it apart. Natalie sat alone on a bench at a bus stop, her hair plastered to her face, her coat soaked through. She'd been walking for hours, aimlessly drifting through the streets of Portland, trying to quiet the hurricane inside her. But the envelope, the photos, the letter, kept flashing in her mind like lightning, blinding and unrelenting. And yet, something gnawed at her, the way Ryan had looked at her. Hurt, desperate, not calculating. She'd seen liars before. She'd loved one. They had a look. A tell. Ryan hadn't had that. His confusion, his urgency. It hadn't felt fake, but she couldn't risk being wrong again. Not with him. Not when her heart had started to believe in something more. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over Ryan's number. The rain streaked the screen, her breath fogging the glass. What would she even say? Sorry for storming out. I might believe you after all. Before she could decide, headlights cut through the downpour. She glanced up instinctively, just as a black sedan barreled down the road, tires screeching as it hit a slick patch of pavement. The car swerved, fish-tailed wildly, then slammed headlong into a pole with a deafening crunch of metal and glass. Natalie's heart stopped. Her body moved before her mind caught up. No, she breathed, breaking into a sprint. No, no, no. As she neared the wreckage, her worst fear solidified. It was Ryan's car. Steam hissed from under the crumpled hood. The driver's side door hung crookedly open. Ryan was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trailing from a gash on his temple. His suit was torn, soaked, his skin pale in dim streetlight. "Ryan!" she shouted, sliding to her knees beside him. "Hey! Stay with me! Come on!" His eyes fluttered, barely open. His voice was slurred, weak. "I'm here," she said quickly, her hands flying over his body, checking for injuries. Pulse, faint but steady. Breathing, shallow. She ripped her sleeve and pressed it against the side of his head to slow the bleeding. "Why would you do this?" she whispered, trembling. "Why come after me like this?" He tried to speak, lips parting. Couldn't. "Let you go." Tears blurred her vision, mixing with the rain. "Don't talk, just hold on. You're going to be okay. I'm not going anywhere." Another set of headlights approached, and a car skidded to a stop nearby. Lisa jumped out, phone already to her ear. "I called an ambulance," she shouted, rushing over. "They're 5 minutes out!" Natalie nodded, her voice catching. "Help me keep pressure on his head." He hit it hard. Together they worked in silence, only the sound of rain and their shallow breaths filling the night air. Ryan coughed, grimacing in pain. I tried to explain. "Shh," Natalie said, cradling his face with one hand. "Just stay awake." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't want to lose you." "You're not going to," she said fiercely. "You're not leaving me like this." Red and blue lights lit up the street seconds later. Paramedics rushed in, pulling Ryan from her arms and onto a stretcher. Natalie followed close, soaked and shivering, her hands stained with his blood. Again. At the hospital, she paced the waiting room and borrowed scrubs, her hair still damp, her body aching. Lisa sat nearby, just as shaken. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. A doctor finally emerged, tugging down his mask. "He's stable," he said. "Concussion, 2 broken ribs, and a deep cut on his head, but he's going to be okay." Natalie exhaled like she'd been underwater too long. "Can I see him?" The doctor nodded. "He's asking for you?" She stepped into the room, heart thudding, breath caught in her chest. Ryan lay in bed, pale but conscious. Tubes, monitors, bruises. And still, somehow, he smiled when he saw her. "You're here," he rasped. Natalie moved to his side, taking his hand. "Of course I'm here." "I chased you," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Anne nearly died doing it. Her throat tightened. Don't you ever do that again. I had to find you, he murmured. Couldn't let you think it was a lie. She leaned closer, tears finally spilling. Natalie never let go of his hand. Not while the machines beeped steadily around them, not while the rain continued its quiet rhythm against the hospital windows, and certainly not while Ryan drifted in and out of sleep with a pale scent of pain on his face. She sat by his side in the borrowed scrubs the nurses had given her, her clothes from the storm still damp in a locker down the hall. The silver pendant around her neck glinted under the fluorescent lights. Brave. And for once, she felt like maybe she was. Ryan stirred again, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze found her in the dim light, and he managed a faint smile. You're still here, he murmured. Told you I wasn't going anywhere, she replied, brushing a damp curl away from his forehead. His fingers curled weakly around hers. I was afraid you'd run again. I almost did, she admitted, her voice soft. I let Mark get into my head. I'm sorry. You had every reason to doubt me, Ryan said, wincing slightly as he shifted. I should have told you more. Sooner. She looked down at their joined hands, her thumb tracing the faint scar across his knuckle. You almost died chasing me, Ryan. That's more than most people would do. I didn't need words after that. He chuckled, the sound faint but real. She gave him a look half amused, half exasperated. You're reckless. Maybe, he said, eyes locked on hers. But you're worth it. Her throat tightened. There it was, clear and simple. No pretense, no games. Just the truth. She wanted to answer, to say everything she hadn't been brave enough to admit. But the door opened before she could. Lisa stepped inside, her coat draped over one arm and a small folder in her hand. Her smile was tired but relieved. Heard you were awake, she said. About time. Ryan smirked weakly. Couldn't miss the drama. Lisa walked to the bedside and set the folder down gently. Mark's finished. Police caught him at the warehouse. He confessed to everything. Ordering the first crash, forging the documents, trying to siphon off the charity fund into a shell account. He's looking at serious prison time. Natalie inhaled sharply. And the fund? Safe, Lisa confirmed. Lawyers verified it this morning. You hit 32 tomorrow, Ryan. Ryan's eyes flicked to Natalie. Ours, he corrected, his voice sure. Lisa smiled, quietly stepping out to give them space. Natalie watched him for a long moment. The man she'd dragged from a car wreck, yelled at in a rainstorm, fallen asleep beside without meaning to. The man who had risked everything. The man who had risked everything, not just for a promise to his mother, but for her. You didn't have to do all this, she whispered. I did, he said. For her, for you. For me. Her chest ached with something that felt like more than gratitude. It was all tangled now. Hope and fear and everything in between. She squeezed his hand tighter. Then don't do it alone anymore. He nodded slowly. I don't want to. The next morning, Ryan's 32nd birthday, the nurses brought in a small cake with a single candle, humming an off-key version of Happy Birthday. Natalie lit the wick, holding it up with a smirk. Make a wish, she said. He looked at her, the flame dancing in his eyes. Already got it? The room chuckled. She handed him a slice, and he took a careful bite, grimacing with a smile. You're impossible, she teased. He grinned. You like it. Later, when they were alone again, Ryan shifted upright, pain evident in his movement, but determination in his eyes. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice firm despite the strain. Natalie sat back in her chair, suddenly alert. "This started as a deal," he said. "A way to fulfill my mom's wish. But it's not that anymore. I don't want it to end. Not with you." Her heart skipped. She'd felt it too, the shift, but hearing it aloud made it real. Terrifyingly real. "Ryan," she started, uncertain. He lifted a hand gently. "You don't have to say anything now. I just needed you to know. I'll wait. As long as it takes." She looked at him, the bruises, the bandages, the unwavering eyes, and something inside her cracked open. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I was scared," she whispered. "After my mom, after Kyle. I didn't think I could trust anyone again. But that night, when you called me an angel, I've been falling for you ever since. I just didn't want to admit it." His breath caught. A smile bloomed slowly across his face. "So you're saying I've got a chance?" She laughed through the tears. "More than a chance." And then she kissed him. Soft and sure. While the morning light spilled through the window, washing away the storm. Ryan was discharged a week later, moving slower than usual, leaning on a cane that he clearly hated but tolerated for Natalie's sake. His strength returned little by little, each day marked by small victories. Walking down the stairs without help, laughing without wincing, sleeping through the night without pain. Natalie stayed at the mansion, but not as a guest anymore. Something between them had shifted for good. There were no more rehearsed smiles, no carefully worded introductions. Just mornings with shared coffee, and evenings spent reviewing hospital plans with their feet touching beneath the table. They no longer spoke about the 3-month deal. It hung in the past like a broken frame. Still visible, but no longer holding anything of value. Together, they finalized the details for the hospital's grand opening. Natalie took charge of the guest list and the medical staffing. Ryan reviewed construction updates and coordinated donors, but he always made time for her, whether it was to bring her dinner during a late night or to read over her clinic proposal for the 10th time with fresh eyes and endless patience. Mark's trial came and went like a storm they'd already weathered. He was sentenced without drama, and neither Natalie nor Ryan attended. There was nothing left to prove. The truth had already spoken for them. One crisp morning, weeks after Ryan's birthday, the hospital stood tall against the skyline, its white walls gleaming, banners unfurling in the breeze. A large crowd had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Donors, press, community leaders, and hospital staff filled the courtyard, their voices humming with anticipation. Ryan stood on a small stage, Natalie at his side, her hand tucked in his. He wore a navy suit, tailored to perfection. She wore a soft blue dress that fluttered slightly in the wind. The brave pendant rested against her collarbone, glinting in the sun. When Ryan stepped up to the microphone, a hush settled over the crowd. "This hospital," he began, his voice clear and unwavering, "was my mother's dream. She believed everyone deserved a second chance, regardless of income, status, or circumstance. She taught me that giving back isn't optional. It's a responsibility." He paused, glancing at Natalie. "I'm here because someone gave me a second chance, too. Someone who pulled me from a wreck, who believed in something bigger than herself. I'm finishing my mother's dream, with the best partner I could ask for." Applause erupted, warm and genuine. Natalie stepped forward, taking her place at the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "This isn't just a building," she said. "It's hope. For the people who fall through the cracks. for the ones who sit in overcrowdeders and wait until it's too late. I lost my mom that way. She deserved better. They all do. This place is for her, for them, and for all of us who believe that care shouldn't come with conditions. More applause, louder now. Together, they held a pair of ceremonial scissors and cut the red ribbon. Cheers echoed through the courtyard. Cameras flashed, and Natalie looked at Ryan. Her smile mirrored in his eyes. They had built this together, brick by brick, heart by heart. After the ceremony, they walked the hospital halls hand in hand. The space was alive already. Nurses checking charts, families waiting with nervous hope. Natalie paused by the pediatric wing, watching a little girl clutch a teddy bear, as a nurse knelt beside her. "This is it," she whispered. "What we fought for." Ryan stood close behind her, his voice soft, and more. She turned, eyes shining. More. He nodded, taking her hand. Us, this, whatever comes next. Outside, the clouds had lifted, replaced by a gentle breeze and the hint of spring. Natalie leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I used to think love was something to run from," she said quietly. "But you showed me it's something to hold on to." Ryan tilted her chin up, eyes locked on hers. She smiled, unguarded and true. And when he kissed her there, with the hospital behind them and their future ahead, it felt like the closing of one chapter, and the promise of another just beginning. Months later, the morning was cool and golden, sunlight filtering through drifting clouds as a small crowd gathered on the east side of Portland. There were no television cameras, no velvet ropes or gala gowns, just neighbors in folding chairs, kids holding balloons, and the quiet hum of hope. A newly built sign arched proudly above the entrance. Carter Free Clinic. Natalie stood near the front doors, her heart thudding as she watched families line up outside, some with babies in their arms, others with tired eyes and worn shoes. She recognized those eyes. She'd worn them once, too. The building behind her wasn't large, just 4 exam rooms, a modest waiting area, and one coffee machine that still made odd gurgling sounds. But it was hers. Every tile, every light fixture, every worn wooden chair had been chosen with purpose, with love, with memory. Ryan stood beside her, his arm draped casually around her waist, no longer needing a cane, no longer playing any role but the one he'd chosen to stay in. His eyes were bright, not with pride for the clinic, but for her. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, like she was the very thing he'd been building all along. "You happy?" he asked, his voice low, his breath brushing her ear. Natalie nodded, her hand resting lightly on the pendant that never left her neck. "More than I thought I could be." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, quiet vow sealed in the gesture. A local nurse stepped forward to unlock the front doors, and Natalie turned to the small group assembled before them. She cleared her throat, her voice strong, despite the emotion curling in her chest. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "This clinic started as a dream. Mine, my mother's, and now yours too. This is a place where no one will be turned away. No matter where you're from, what you have or don't have. Here, you'll be seen. You'll be cared for." The crowd clapped, a few cheers rising up from the back. Ryan watched her with open admiration, but didn't step forward, didn't try to claim a word of it. This was her day, her legacy. His hand simply found hers, giving a squeeze as if to say, "I'm still here. Always." The ribbon was a soft green, the same color as her mother's old nurse's uniform, the one she kept folded in a drawer at home. Natalie cut it with a pair of scissors handed to her by a young girl in the front row, and as the crowd applauded, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Not because something was ending, but because something had finally begun. Later, as she walked through the halls of her new clinic, she passed by the pediatric room and paused. A little boy sat on the edge of the exam table, swinging his feet while a volunteer nurse handed him a lollipop. The boy grinned at her and Natalie smiled back, warmth blooming in her chest. "This is why," she whispered to herself. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his shoulder resting against the frame. "You ready for lunch?" he asked. "In a minute." They strolled out to the front lawn where a picnic blanket had been laid out beneath a flowering tree. Sandwiches, lemonade, and a plastic container of her favorite cookies. Rian's doing waited for them. As they sat down, Natalie tucked her feet beneath her and leaned against him, her head resting just below his chin. "What now?" she asked after a long moment of peaceful silence. He took her hand, turning it over in his. "Now, we live, we keep building. Together." She tilted her head, studying his profile. "You really meant it, didn't you, that night in the hospital?" He looked at her, his eyes warm and unwavering. "Every word. You gave me back my life. I'm just trying to make sure I'm worthy of it." She smiled, a soft, knowing thing. "You already are." He kissed her then, slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world. And when they pulled apart, Natalie knew the storm was far behind them. Whatever came next, they were ready. Together, they looked out across the street, where more families approached the clinic's doors, and Natalie squeezed his hand, holding on to everything they'd built. Everything they were still becoming. Life lesson from the story. At its heart, this story is about second chances, the ones we give others, and the ones we dare to give ourselves. Natalie and Ryan come from different worlds, shaped by grief, betrayal, and loss. But when circumstances force their paths to cross, they slowly peel back the layers of fear and self-protection to reveal something deeper: trust, healing, and love. The journey they take reminds us that not all wounds are visible, and not all love stories begin with perfection. Sometimes love grows not in grand gestures, but in quiet persistence, in shared silence, ensured silence, in showing up, in building something meaningful together. It teaches us that no matter how broken we feel, we are still worthy of love. And more importantly, we are capable of giving it. Perhaps the most powerful takeaway is this: hope is never truly lost. It just waits for us to believe in it again. Whether it's through chasing a dream, fighting for a second chance, or holding someone's hand in the darkest moments, we find pieces of ourselves in each other. And when we allow ourselves to hope, to trust, and to love again, something extraordinary begins. If you found this story meaningful or it touched your heart in any way, let us know where you're reading from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories that inspire, heal, and remind us what truly matters. Thanks for being here.